Right. Today I'm joined by Erik Cabral, entrepreneur, author, and expert in brand development. Thanks so much for joining me today, Eric.
Yeah, James, thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Love to just kind of first off, just kind of hear about how you started on air brands back in 2018. I think you're kind of like really early stages of using podcasting for brand development. What was your kind of thought process? Like what got you to that stage of seeing that as a opportunity you want to take on?
Well, it wasn't clear at first, James. It was really a happy accident. Podcasting being our main thing, and producing audio only shows. That was not the strategy at first. The strategy was really I had left corporate America after 21 years, and then I was like, I'm going to do what I know how to do, which is be a creative. Like branding, marketing, social media marketing, all that stuff was what we did as an agency. Um, And then the podcast was really just a vehicle for me to have conversations with people versus going, hey, James, would you have some coffee with me? I want to pick your brain. I was in the real estate investing space. So I was trying to learn how to buy, single family homes, small multi-unit, and trying to build wealth that way to replace my income from a nice steady 9 to 5. And dude, I was just surrounded by abundance, like people who had a different frame of mind. I came from a complete scarcity, and to hear these guys speak, like, how can I help you? How can I serve? How can I be of value? I was like, man, let me just record the conversations I'm having in the hallways. It wasn't a podcast. It was really just for my own vault of content that I could kind of just use as a library to learn. And all of a sudden it started to evolve. I was like, let me buy a microphone, let me buy a camera. I'm a, tech nerd. So I was like, I love this stuff. So let me use this excuse and put it on Air Brand's dime. Like, okay, I could swipe the card and buy all this fun, all these toys. And before I knew it, it was like a podcast. And people would go, that's the podcast guy, during real estate investing meetups. But it wasn't that. It was really just me streaming live on Facebook. And then it started to evolve, and more people started to recognize me as the guy to have a conversation with because all of a sudden they have clips. All of a sudden they're like, getting clients as a result of being on my show. And then I was like, wait a second, more people keep asking me, how do I do it? And if I could do it for them. So then it became like less about me and more about we. How do we all succeed at this? And one client turned into dozens. And yeah, all of a sudden I was like, I think this needs to shift. We can take the creative, the branding, the marketing, the social media stuff and apply it to all the content we're creating. It seems like it's total no brainer nowadays, but back then I was like, wait, this works. Podcast is the content, and then we as the team create a boatload of content, Gary Vee style, right? Just endless amounts and gobs of content each and every day for our clients. And that's how it evolves.
Amazing. Because I think that's what really everybody wants is like, how do you mass produce large volumes of content? And I think the podcast format gives you a long form first, and then you can create short form out of that. And then you get a lot more volume. So instead of trying to record and think about every single individual clip, you can just have one large conversation, right? And then you can create a lot of content out of that. And that's probably what a lot of your clients really like.
But yeah, especially as investors, you want to build trust, and because you're raising capital, right? You're raising millions of dollars to go take down that multi-unit, that commercial property, and you need other people to kind of, other people's money. You want other people to join you on the project because you can't do it alone. So what better way than podcasting, to build that trust over time, with video clips, with audio. Yeah, it's just a great vehicle for business in general.
Definitely. And then just comparing to like how people are doing it now versus back then, is it pretty consistent in terms of like what you guys were doing back then that versus what's being done now? Is there just a lot more competition in terms of producing the content? Like that's what I really see is just been huge volume increase in the amount of content that's being produced, especially around podcasts. What do you see as kind of the ways that you kind of stand out now that are maybe different than originally?
Well, yeah, things were simpler back then. The cameras were really just used to zoom in, and right, the quality didn't have to be 4K or anything. It was all audio only. Now people understand, that shift into video first. So that's the big difference right now, which is a lot more of a challenge to produce versus, hey, anybody could do this. Just record on your phone. You record in your basement. Nobody cares what the background looks like or the video. So yeah, the bar has been raised for sure. I think that people who are still doing it, there's definitely less. Like in 2021 and 2022, we exploded because it was easier to get into the game. But, time will show, yeah, who's really in it and has a passion for it or desire to, add value to people's lives and business. So those are the ones that stuck, and those who are still around, they're hopefully the ones that are creating the good content, right? There's still people who are trying to do it, but you got to think about the visuals now. You got to be good on camera. People don't understand this simple thing, James, is when you turn the camera on, your energy level has to be turned up at least 3 levels,
Right.
because if you just talk, if I could just talk normal here, and, like, it's gonna look really boring and low energy, like,
For
so
sure.
you have to feel, like, sort of uncomfortable if that's not your norm, to amplify the way you speak, the way you move, bring it up, because even though it may feel unnatural and like you're performing, the camera's going to show it as normal. It's just gonna feel more normal and more engaging for the audience versus a lot of people who just still don't understand that concept. And I get it, right? They didn't have public training, for speaking and things like that, unless you went through like a Toastmasters or something.
Done that.
But yeah, it takes getting the reps in, James, for sure. Like turning the camera on and just like boom, all of a sudden you're like, you you turn into somebody else.
For sure. Yeah, I think I've totally have felt that. And I think the challenge, at least from my experience, is that you can also take that too far where you're not authentic. Is like, how do you raise your bar and energy level, but not be, you know, awkward, not awkward, but like overdo it in a way where it sounds fake or artificial, that you're putting on too much of an act. And I think one of the big values of podcasting is that you can really share your like true authentic self. And I think people more than ever are looking for authenticity and realness. And in a long form content, you can't hide who you are, what you do, and it can come off very fake if you go to it. So like, how have you found to like gauge or guide podcasters on like the right balance from like you want to raise your energy bar, but you don't want to be fake. Like you still want to be authentic to who you are and how you sound.
For sure. I think it's really getting the reps in, James. Like,
Mm.
you have to do it in order to find your rhythm and your voice. You have to do something that's sustainable, right? If it isn't you, and there's a version of you that's only present during, recording and the cameras being on, you're going to be exhausted afterwards
Right.
because like you're doing something unnatural. There's a way to do it where at the very least, coming in with that awareness when the cameras first turn on, and then you could, sort of like have a cadence. There's going to be a flow. If your normal cadence is this monotone way of delivering your message, that's fine. But be aware of that. Like, oh man, go back, listen to yourself, watch your episodes. It's hard for sure, but go in there and go, okay, I could have definitely. I was passionate there. Let me at least, reflect how I was feeling versus just like bringing it in and not having ebbs and flows to the conversation and your voice. We have to think about our voices as an instrument, right? And if somebody was playing the trumpet or the cello or whatever it was, like the same note throughout the whole the piece, people are going to tune out. So you have to create. And if you notice some of the best speakers on stage, whether it be Tony Robbins or his mentor Jim Rohn, they have this way of speaking where the pauses are intentional, the rhythms, that they get really soft, right? When they're really going to talk about something important. And then they get crazy, like, hey, you got to listen to me, because then the audience naturally wakes up
Mm.
during those opportunities when you're like, okay, pay attention. I'm speaking loud now. I'm speaking with passion. So that's all. It's like you don't need training, but watch some of the best people. So watch the people that you admire and what are they doing? Kind of try to unpack and deconstruct what they're doing that works. If you can't do that, then yeah, hire a coach to help you deliver your messages.
Definitely. Yeah, 'cause it's really it's a behavior, is like it's a skill that turns into a behavior of like how do you act in accordance to when you're doing this specific event to get a better outcome. And really at the end of the day, everybody who's doing this is trying to get more attention on themselves, on their business, right? They're trying to attract somebody with the hope and goal of hopefully providing value back. That's where I think the kind of foundation of all podcasting content should really be rooted in. I think the ones that succeed the most are kind of grounded in we're going to provide value back. But the only way to really gain and grab attention and hold it is doing what I think you're explaining, right? Is the skill of communicating to an audience and bringing them in and holding their attention so that you can get your message across. I think that's kind of the foundation layer of it.
And I want to add one extra component to that, James. As you start to deconstruct and figure out what works, what's critical to that is storytelling, like
Hmm.
being able
Yeah,
to extract lessons through your experiences and then taking that and putting it in a story format. So, who's the hero in the story? Who was the guide in the story? What was the lessons learned? How did you fall on your face? I think that early entrepreneurs, and myself included, you don't want to speak about your failures because you think like that's going to be negative towards you and your business. But no, what it does is what we're talking about here, truly authentic content is being vulnerable and sharing like, this is what I learned. I fell on my face. I failed at this, but I came out on the other side. Versus like, I failed at this and I didn't learn a lesson. I failed, I fell on my face, but I don't know what to do next. Like, that's not valuable. The value is in the lessons learned that you can go share so other people don't have to fall on their face. They can go, oh, this happened to James. This happened to Eric. I'm not going to do that.
100%. And it just makes you more relatable in that way, is that you can relate to other people because everybody has their own failures and challenges that they're trying to overcome. And if they can learn from you, then they can overcome their own. Something I did want to ask you about is kind of what you see is kind of the next is like, I look at organic marketing is that we really have three formats to do it. It's written, it's audio, it's video. Those have taken a lot of different shapes and forms in terms of like promoting personal brands, organic marketing, all of that early on, like back when I was really coming into the marketing, it was all blog heavy and then Twitter or X now and a lot of written content. And then it turned into vlogs. And then now I think podcasting is in this huge boom around audio. What do you kind of see as the next kind of format and transition that's going to happen in from like an organic content marketing?
Yeah, I think that we're going to have to be really good at doing all things.
Mm,
So, and by that I mean building an ecosystem for your thought leadership platform. The tools are always going to evolve. The tools are always going to be there to help us be more efficient, to help us, produce and create and um, but it'll never replace the storytelling aspect. It'll never replace us as humans who have a lot of intrinsic value, right, in who we are, what we do. So I think that getting really good at not just podcasting or delivering your message, but all this stuff translates to you speaking on a stage. This all translates to you leading a workshop, translates to you writing your first, second, third book. All of this stuff creates an ecosystem so that when people look us up, it's not just what Google says about you, it's now what the large language models, it's all what ChatGPT and all of these new tools that are available, people are using LLMs to find out who we are. And where are the LLMs getting this information? From Google, from the internet, from all of the content that you're putting out there. So yes, podcasting is great, but that's just one piece of the ecosystem, right? Speaking on stages, writing books, writing blogs, all of that is part of your business now and has been for a long time. But it's like, who can be the most consistent and the most efficient when creating this content?
got it. And yeah, and you think the next approach is really you just have to be across all those different formats. You have to be in all of those vehicles and really everywhere for your client. I kind of compare that to from a paid perspective. We have this operation everywhere type strategy that we'll explore where we'll focus on one paid ad channel to drive all your traffic into your site and then we do retargeting across every network so that way you're not like over leveraging yourself from a traffic acquisition strategy but from the audience you are reaching that you're driving in a lot of traffic maybe it's organic or maybe it's paid from one ad channel but now you can retarget you stay in front of that same audience everywhere they go so then you're always on in every network to an audience. And I kind of compare that to like an organic strategy is are you always on everywhere organically. So how do you reformat, recondition your content that you did for your podcast into LinkedIn, right? Into blogs, into a Substack, into YouTube, into Instagram. Is that kind of the approach you see the best personal brands really taking on?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there was a time when, Gary Vee and others were like, you got to be everywhere, right? Which is stressful to try to be on every platform, especially if you're trying to focus in like, this is the message on Instagram and how we speak there, different audience, Facebook, Meta, or, X, whatever. Um, I think now, if you're able to focus on LinkedIn as your main platform, like, or YouTube, whichever platform is your main, if you're recording like long form content, there's going to be clips that can be shared on Facebook, Instagram. There's going to definitely be something there as long as you're aware that, like, okay, I need to create content and then trust in the team or trust in the process using AI to say, identify what in this conversation can speak to this audience. So that's where we start to leverage the tools. And I just want to caution people who are hearing this that are creating content at scale is the tools are never really its best when it's left to its own decisions and devices versus you have to be heavily involved still. You can't clone yourself. I don't recommend it. You can do it. The tools are there, but cloning yourself using creating digital versions of yourself, me, are withdrawals from the trust bank. So all the years that we've spent creating content, we've been depositing into the trust bank, depositing into the trust bank, every single clip, every single piece of content, everything that we've built trust. Now people are like, oh, well, I'm going to go AIify. I'm going to go clone myself. And then now subconsciously people can tell like, oh, wait a minute, that's not him. I can even tell like the simple profile photos of people that, like that's not really you. You used AI. What's happening there is it seems innocent enough, and it seems like, oh, as a business owner, I'm creating efficiencies. But what you're doing is you're withdrawing from the bank, the trust bank. Why? I think it's risky. It's too risky to do it.
Yeah, I see LinkedIn as one of the worst offenders of it, of so much slop AI generated post content and
And
writing.
DMs, like I can't even go in
Yeah,
there anymore because it's just like a hoarder house, like
yeah,
of
yeah.
people. It's like I haven't been home for like months, and my mailbox is full of all this junk mail.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
the DMs are
And you
like in
just wanna
LinkedIn. I
throw it
can't.
away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm like gonna
just
look at
throw it all away.
anything. Just
Yeah.
just take it all and burn it.
Yeah, I think it's because it's so easy to produce and replicate is that, I think everything comes back down to supply and demand, and we have an oversupply of content and information and an undersupply in an underutilized demand. Like there's not enough demand to meet the supply. And I think what that ends up doing is that ends up turning everybody off and it gets a lot more competitive to hit that demand. And so you have to be unique and authentic in different ways. And I don't see AI solving that problem yet, or at least it hasn't yet. Maybe some people have found unique, creative ways to do it. And I'm sure there's probably some strategies you can use, but still being truthful and authentic to you and not just having because like all the AI content still sounds very, very similar. Like once you
Yeah,
read it, you would
yeah.
like the
The M
the
dashes.
formatting, the M dashes, but even like it like overuses certain adjectives and the vocabulary it uses, like you can spot it. And I've seen a lot of studies that already came out that the AI content is ignored the second people know it's AI. I
Yes.
think there is some unique things like a wild video that someone creates or the AI generated music that grabs people's attention because it's so unique and different. That is kind of in a category of its own. But if you're trying to transmit information and value, I think it's still got a long way to go of being like authentic and true. I heard somebody on one of my previous guests said this. He said the goal is if you're using AI, the goal is to make it so good nobody even knows that it was done with AI,
Sure.
essentially.
Yeah. For
So,
sure.
how you do that, I think, is the challenge, is learning how to use the tool to get that output.
Yeah. I think it's about just taking the time, right, to make it you. I definitely believe in, using these things to help like the creative process, especially, as a creator, we're tasked to constantly create. So you're not always going to feel creative, but using the tools to kind of like spark that idea, like you feed it something, have it feedback, and then you're like, oh, okay. And then you go run with it. You work in concert with it, but don't let it do all the work. So, for example, you throw in an idea, it spits out a post on LinkedIn for you. You got to go in and you got to modify it to your voice 100%.
Yep, for sure.
That's it. So, there's going to be, make it 70-30 you versus, the other way around, where it's like 30% you, 70% the AI generated. Some people will just go, that sounds great. Way better than I would have wrote it. Cut and paste.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
You never
And
never
I
have a
get it.
second draft.
Dude, I will say I'm guilty of that.
Yeah,
But
sure.
then you start to recognize, like, wait a minute. Yeah, everything and everyone is sounding the same now. So yeah, it's got to be you. We were doing this way before AI. So just get it back to a version that's more, like you said, is more authentic to you, more
Yeah, I
really,
think
really
it's
you.
just having a second draft. I think someone who's famously known for not ever having a second draft is L. Ron Hubbard, and he wrote the Scientology. He wrote the most fiction books in the history of fiction, and he never had a second draft. So all of his content is just sounds crazy and off the wall and doesn't
I
make
didn't
any
know that.
sense.
That's
And
cool.
I think that's what a lot of people are doing. They're not having a second draft. It's use the first draft that gets produced, copy, paste, and publish. And I look at these platforms as being like a junior assistant. So whatever, regardless, whatever we're using it for, it's like a junior assistant that gives you a draft, and it's your job to revise, edit, and create the final output
Yes.
to make it make sense. And
Yeah.
that piece takes time, but the goal is that it takes a task that used to take maybe 2 hours and it takes now 15, 20 minutes of editing. So I think it's just getting back to that. But I think people have a challenge of they'll fill up time regardless. So even if a task used to take somebody, let's say an hour, if now it can be cut down to 15 minutes, they're going to spend that 45 minutes doing something else to fill in that gap and still feel like it took them an hour to produce that task. Right. And I think that's part of the challenge is the organization and time management of still focusing on this is a task I need. It used to take me an hour. It's only taking me 15 minutes to do it now, but I still need to spend the time and effort to make this right.
Yeah. It's a good point.
You've worked with a lot of Fortune 100, Inc. 5000 brands. Like, what have you learned that they do really well? And what do you think that I still see like large brands still come off like inauthentic in some podcasts and content? Like, what do you think that like independent people, smaller brands, smaller companies do really well compared to large brands and vice versa?
Yeah. So large brands, I will say, and that's the majority of my life. It can feel, like you said, we're using the word a lot, inauthentic. But I think that is because there's legacy there, right? For dozens, if not hundreds of years, that brand may have existed. They have not attached their brand to a person, so there's
Mm,
no human quality there. Um, but what I also recognize as a challenge for corporations and large businesses is um, they they try to find the solutions, but what inevitably happens is internally, like they lose sense of who they are, their culture, like what are the values. It gets diluted. So it's really hard to put out content that's authentic for a large company because there are so many cooks in the kitchen, right? And then now all of a sudden you're sitting at the table waiting for the food to come out. And it's like, what this tastes like just like some mishmash mosh of something because there's so many people involved and now the values aren't really directly connected to the founder anymore.
mm.
So a culture is really challenging to maintain and sustain when you're a big, 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 big company. There are ones that do it really well, like the Apples of the world. But then I think that the ones that are doing it well figure out, okay, we got to attach ourselves to a person. Nike figured it out back in the Jordan days. We saw it play out, with Steve Jobs. We see it play out. And now, as small to mid-sized businesses, we're able to easily do that, right? Just get the founder to speak on podcasts or to do the work. And what happens is for the small to mid-sized businesses that understand this, The challenge becomes now you have another job. Now you have another business because that ecosystem, those systems and processes you've created for yourself have become an engine of its own with its own team. It's basically your corporate marketing, which is challenging when you're trying to go build that widget, when you're trying to go sell this thing. Now you're trying to sell the company. But the thing is, you have to look at it as the marketing engine for your company. That's never gone away. That's always been present in large, small, mid-size, doesn't matter. You have to market yourself or people don't know you exist. And now it's just leverage the founder, leverage the CEO, tell stories. That's the modern day way of sort of
Yeah. Always
gathering.
the biggest challenge for a small to medium-sized company, right, is that nobody knows you. I felt I've only worked with small, companies before or worked at and in and owned small businesses, and the biggest challenge is nobody knows you, and that's the biggest thing you have to overcome, and I think we now live in this world where you can create content, very specific content on brand for your specific industry and share value and then attract people that way. So it's the best opportunity. And that's where it kind of leads to my next kind of question is, do you still see it worth it for agencies? Obviously, my audience I want to reach and speak to is advertising agencies, marketing agencies, owners that live in that world and space. Do you still see podcasting as a big opportunity for that, or has it been oversaturated? How do you stand out kind of in this podcasting world?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of answers, James, but I'll try to boil it down to yes. It's still worth it, whether it's oversaturated or not. The way that we stand out is by sharing your stories. No one has your stories. No one has your experience, right? We can't replicate that. So that there's opportunity there for you to stand out by sharing your values, sharing your beliefs, sharing what you've learned. I think the easiest way as someone who's uncomfortable with creating content is to just guest on podcasts. Like we're doing now,
Yeah.
and I know you guest on podcasts as well. Whereas like you're doing this in real time. You're creating content, right, with someone else. You're co-authoring something, and that's a fun way to 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 build that muscle, and then also to just create content. Because what happens is people are looking us up, it will find these clips, right? I look up James Williams, I see you. You're all over the place. It doesn't mean you have to be famous. It just means you need to be there when they're ready to buy, when they're ready to do the work, when they need the solution. All of a sudden, you show up. And they're like, "Oh yeah, I've been seeing James for years. I never really realized I needed his work." And you just have to be there when that time comes.
Yeah. I look at it as great for the second touch for a small to medium sized business is that after you make the initial engagement, however you initially reach or connected with the audience you're trying to reach, is that the next look that they go to is what have you said on social media? What are you doing content wise? What is your website talking about? And all of those second touches, I think, creates a better kind of ecosystem for them to come back to you is that they have more touch points to understanding who you are, what you represent, what you're all about. Are you who you say you are and what you do? Because I think that creates the big difference between somebody who's real, who has done it before, versus somebody who's kind of not quite there yet in trying to get there. Is that can you have, if you've been doing this for 10 years, can you speak to it? Can you talk about it? Are you producing content around it? I think just gives you more validity in your specific field. So I think that's the big opportunity. And I would say for the you got to go to marketing, that really reminds me of like Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time, where he talks about going up the value ladder, starting with admin, operations and delivery, and then marketing and sales and leadership, is that you go up the value ladder of responsibilities, and marketing and sales is at the top of your value ladder of priorities. So the sooner you can get out of the operations and working in the business, you're working on the business when you're doing marketing for the business to attract and acquire more customers. And I think that's the big opportunity for many small to mid-sized companies.
For sure. Well said.
Where do you kind of see? I think the other side of this is, I think we talked about this briefly, but just to circle back, is like there's this huge increase in AI generated content. What do you see as like the opportunity and challenge for small mid-sized companies trying to kind of get their message across and reach their audience as the opportunity. Like when in a world where AI generated content only seemingly to increase in cluttering the kind of
Sure.
networks, what's the opportunity of how small independent brands and agencies kind of stick out in that space?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's an opportunity for founders, CEOs, especially in the marketing space, who understands, how to share other people's messages, how to pinpoint who their clients' audiences are and, find ways that you can market for them. Well, we have to turn the camera around on us and learn how to market for ourselves. And I think that the way to do that is to leverage AI. You can do that for sure by having a conversation with it. You know what? I remember when it first came out, they were really leveraging voice, and then somehow they pulled back from it. It used to be really good. It sounded like Scarlett Johansson at the time. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm in that movie with Joaquin Phoenix." Um, and I think there's a really powerful and fun way to engage with it so that you can figure out what your story is, what your brand is, what your values are. Once you have complete clarity on that, then you can start creating clips, you can start creating content um, to share with others, like, what your value is. Like, people don't know what you do, they don't know how you help people. Well, using these tools, identify, what those messages are, so that it's we were talking about this earlier, being consistent with your pillars of content, making sure you're not talking about, hey, I'm a real estate investor, but then on the side, I like to build cold plunges in my garage, and I'm creating clips. And then all of a sudden, this is a true story. Then somebody, comes to you and goes, "Hey man, can you help me build a cold plunge in my garage?" Sure. And then all of a sudden that's occupying time. And you're like, wait, this is not my business. Well, you're putting out stuff that isn't aligned with your business that you're trying to build. So just being, I know that we're all passionate. We have a lot of different, interests. But if you truly want to focus on building your business, you have to understand which are the messages that I need to deliver consistently over and over and over, that lets people know what I do. That's the last thing you want, is like for people to see you go, I love your content, but what do you do again? That happened to me, and I'm like, "What am I doing wrong?" I'm like, "Oh, because 'cause I'm talking about 100 different things
Yeah,
versus the one thing that I do." So, yeah, just being really clear, using the tools to identify what that is, and sharing that message over and over and over. It's gonna feel like you're saying the same thing over and over, but you need that, right? James knows, he could share with you, like, how many touches it needs for people to finally recognize, "Oh, I'm ready. Who do I think of? You. You're the
sure.
person."
Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that, what do you see as the best way to really like promote and build? If you're starting from zero and trying to get your content out there, like how do you how do you grow a podcast in terms of listenership, followers? How do you get that content growth from an audience perspective?
I'm a huge proponent of organic growth. Now, there's going to be a lot of people, and I know that you're in the business of helping people expand beyond that. But if you at the very least start to just create without thinking about, I'm just going to go viral. I want as many. It starts to become a vanity metric issue, and you have to start to ask yourself, what? Why am I doing this? Am I doing this for my ego? Or am I doing this to build and grow the business and truly help people, right? Be in service of others. Because if you start to focus on, I'm here to serve people, I'm here to solve problems, then you're not going to worry about how many downloads, how many views, how many clicks. If you have a business that has a price point where if you get one client, like for me, if I got a client, before I sold my company, we're talking $30,000 at minimum a
Mm,
year. So it made it worth me showing up and turning the cameras and the mics on, because I would get clients and I didn't need to be famous in order to run and grow a business. So, and if you're selling a widget, and it's like $5, or you're selling an app that's a dollar, whatever it is, then yeah, maybe you're going to need the numbers, because that's a numbers game. But from my experience growing organically, that's how we create authenticity. And then you can start turning the ads on as you start to notice people like this content. People like when I speak about this, then you can start to grow and expand.
yeah, absolutely. That's what I've seen. I haven't worked with many people who want to like necessarily grow their content from with a paid. Because, like, you definitely could. You could drive a lot of traffic to paid and try to follow her and drive, subscriptions, and I'm sure people have done it. But I think one of the biggest values you get of it is you get content that is really authentic and really true to who you are, and then you could use that piece of content to then drive to a lead gen form or a
Yes,
specific sales page or something else that's more intentional for your specific business. But I think you're totally right, is that basically your focus is on not on the numbers, but on are you reaching the right people, especially for a B2B more focused podcast? Are you reaching the right audience that you can attract back to your business and then help grow your services that way? And you really don't, most B2B businesses probably do not need more than 5,000, 10,000. Like, how many people can you handle? What's your supply that you have available to serve clients? Most B2B businesses are probably not in the millions, but are in the thousands. So you don't need that many people, but you need very targeted people. And if you have the right content, then your approach is like you'll really attract them that way.
absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, Love to hear about your book. I know you wrote a book, Be Your Brand to Glorify God. Can you tell me about what was the motivation and inspiration of that and kind of what you learned through that process?
Yeah, yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks, brother. You know, when we're out there trying to grow our business, right? We can get really involved in the idea of being famous, right? And I got to speak on stages, I got to be on podcasts, yeah, I got to meet people. You can start to lose sight of why you started your business in the first place because then you become the business. If you're building your personal brand, eventually you're going to reach a road where it's like you or the business. And yes, you can smash those together for sure. I wasn't there yet. And I started speaking on stages and I would experience these things where people would line up to speak to me after I get off stage. And I would hear the little voice like, "You're the man. You're the freaking man." And I was like, it was my ego,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Starting to eat at me. And I never felt good about it. So I had to kind of pull away from social media. I had to pull away from the stages and just like at the time meditate, just like do yoga, meditation, be quiet, go in the middle of like nowhere in a forest and just like be quiet. And during that quiet, dude, I felt something and I started to recognize that it was coming from above, right? It was God. And that's when it hit me. The book that I was writing at the time, which was called Be Your Brand, was all about me. When I read the first draft, I was like, "Oh, this book sucks. Like the stories are fun, but why does this not feel right?" Because it was about my ego. And then I started to understand, oh, if I put the work in and I realize it's not about me, it's about something much, much, much bigger than me. I'm just going to dedicate the whole book to that. And once that process started, dude, it was like done because it took me like a year to write the book because it was hard to like pull this all out of me. And then when I realized, oh, I just need to glorify God in my message and align with my faith, that's when it just like happened literally within a flight from Colorado back to New Jersey. Whatever that time frame is, I finished the book, the first draft of the book on a plane. So it flows. When you have
Yeah.
clarity, things flow.
Starts
Eh,
coming out, starts pouring out of you. Amazing, because that connection got you to complete the book, right? Because like, that realization, I should say, really got you because 'cause you're focusing on just, like, how do you be your brand, but it wasn't coming through. It was until you realized that it wasn't about you, and it was about removing your ego and about glorifying God. That's what got you through the finish line
yeah,
and
for
really
sure.
making it, and I think that's the best foundation for content and business is that are you doing it to kind of prop up yourself or are you doing it to really provide value to others? And I think if you come more of like I'm providing value to others, which I think is really the huge value of business, is that you are helping other people. And I think that's a very important part of what, God creator wants you to deliver on, that creates better outcomes for you, for how you feel about your business, your content, everything else like that. And sound like that's what you got out of your book is really that through line. It wasn't about you, it was about helping others.
Yeah, it's about helping others, helping others realize the same thing, because it was
Yeah.
really about, the word that I kept using when I was writing and publishing the book was just like Christian entrepreneur activation, because a lot of us don't want to stand on the pulpit. It's like, it's not about me, it's about him. And the book was really serving as a vehicle to give people permission, you know. So yeah, yeah, I call it an exercise. It was cathartic. It made me deeper and closer in my faith. So yeah, I think find that thing that helps you realize that it's not about you. It's not about us. Like, it's whatever that bigger picture is for you. If you can remain focused on that, it just gets easier. It gets easier versus like this is a struggle, or I'm doing it as hey, I have to do this because I need to build my business. That's not sustainable to me anyway. It wasn't sustainable. So I was like, I need something much, much bigger. And when you step into these mastermind groups and you hear all these speakers, they're always like, "What's your why?" Simon Sinek,
Right.
"What's your why? What's your
Yeah.
why?" You come to find out these people are people of faith. These people are like pulling
Sure.
from scripture, you
Yeah.
know,
For
and
sure.
it's like, but they're not, in a secular sort of environment and message. You do want to offend people. So, but yeah, find what that is for you. For me, it was money, and then it was my family, and then the two other things. But then when I got there, I was like, then what? Right? That's where I mean it's not sustainable. What's beyond just money when you get there, and what's beyond having a healthy family and foundation and home? Then what? It's like, is it about travel? Is it about we all need purpose, right? And that why is your purpose.
Yeah. That always having that next vision and dream and goal is that every single level, I think it opens up new opportunities of people you can serve, people you can help. First start off with yourself, and then you grow to a family, and then you can grow to a wider family, and then you can grow to a community, then you can grow to a nation, then you can just continue to rise up in different levels as you kind of go up. But it's about having that internal process of figuring out what's next. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they get stuck like, oh, I accomplished this, I'm done. And then if you're not growing, then you're degrading. You think you can't stay in the middle.
Yeah, I always forget the statistic, James, where it's a really high percentage of people that pass away after they retire.
Yeah.
And we can look it up. Let's make up a number. 76% of people, die a year after retirement. And
Right.
like, whatever that number is, it's high and just shocking. It's because you don't have purpose.
Yep.
Your purpose was your job, right? Your identity was in your job. And then when you take that away, it's like, what do I need to live? And yeah, we
Yeah.
need purpose.
Yeah. And I think a purpose beyond a job, I think is really important, especially in this day and age where a lot of people are projecting into the future that a lot of these AI systems could wipe out large volumes of jobs, whether or not it does that or not. I kind of see both sides of the opinion. I've heard people, make a strong, explanation why it's going to happen and a opinion on why it's not. But if that does, or we go down the road of more jobs are being replaced with AI and automation. What is your purpose beyond your job? What is your focus, or how do you provide value to you, your family, your community? All of that, I think, is important for everybody to consider now and into the future.
Yeah, it's huge. Exactly.
Last question for you: if you go back and give your younger self, one piece of advice when you're starting your career out, what would that be?
You don't have to be famous. I think a lot of people get into, we're living in a society where we have the tools to create content, which people believe that the end goal result of that is everyone's going to know who I am.
Mm,
And that could eat at you for sure. I've seen it happen to friends, and it tears them apart, if not destroys them. So, yeah, don't look into this as you start to develop the tools, everything that we've talked about in this episode. You will eventually, if you put in enough of time and reps in, you're going to get good at it. If it's feeding your ego, that's a dangerous road that'll lead down for sure. It's about service. It's about helping people. It's about the value that you add in people's lives. That I would have told myself that because I didn't understand that, and I built it thinking that, oh, I want to be famous. Oh, people recognize me when I'm in the room. It's not about that. Yeah, that's what I would share with myself.
awesome. I love it. Thanks so much, Eric.
Yeah, brother. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.